What if I told you that in the scorching Arizona desert, where temperatures could soar above 145 degrees Fahrenheit, a jail existed with no walls, no air conditioning, and that the only form of shelter was surplus Korean War military tents surrounded by barbed wire? This place was known locally as Tent City Jail, one of the most controversial and notorious prisons in US history. When Sheriff Joe Arpaio established the outpost in 1993, he claimed, quote, "If soldiers can live in these conditions, so can prisoners." And as you might imagine, what began as a supposed solution to overcrowding quickly became a lightning rod for debate. So, was this harsh environment a necessary deterrent for criminals, or was it a violation of human rights? Stay tuned to find out, as today we uncover the full story of Tent City Jail. I'm your host Ryan Sokash, and you're watching It's History. I need to make a quick disclaimer considering the controversial nature of today's story. You see, I'm not entirely sure how YouTube's going to react to this type of content, so to stay on the safe side, I'd be grateful if any of you can join us over on Patreon. It's pretty easy to join the community. You just take out your phone, open the camera app, and scan this QR code right here with your phone's camera. The link's also in the description. I don't need everyone to join the community. Just a few people will do. A little bit goes a very, very long way in ensuring that we can continue pushing forward with our content and making things that don't necessarily have to appease the brands and algorithms. Otherwise, let's get on with the story. Let's go back to the early 1990s when the jails in Arizona were facing a severe overcrowding crisis. The inmate population was growing at an alarming rate, and existing facilities were operating far beyond capacity. The issue wasn't unique to Arizona though. Nationwide, incarceration rates had skyrocketed due to tougher crime policies. The war on drugs and the introduction of harsher sentencing, even for minor offenses, led to more people being imprisoned and for longer periods. Additionally, options for parole and bail were significantly reduced during this time. In many states, including Arizona, new laws restricted early release, meaning inmates had to serve a larger portion of their sentence before even being considered for parole. At the same time, Maricopa County in specific was experiencing rapid population growth, which led to an increase in arrests and higher demand for jail space. Now, the problem wasn't just a lack of cells, but the lack of funding to build new prisons. Local voters and legislators were reluctant to approve costly infrastructure projects for the jail system. Amid this crisis, in 1993, Sheriff Joe Arpaio took office with a clear promise to enforce a tough-on-crime policy without relying on expensive new construction. During his tenure, Arpaio gained national recognition for his extreme methods like relentless crackdown on illegal immigration, making him a controversial figure both in and outside of Arizona. That's when he came up with his most infamous idea. Instead of building a traditional prison, he would use military tents to create an open-air jail complex. Inspired by military prison camps, the new sheriff defended his proposal as an efficient, low-cost solution. In his view, jail was meant to be a punishment, not a place of comfort. From the start, Tent City was met with controversy. While the Arizona sheriff claimed the project would save the county millions of dollars, organizations like Amnesty International warned that the jail failed to meet basic human rights standards. Others went as far as comparing it to a concentration camp, denouncing officials for subjecting inmates to extreme conditions, something its supporters justified as a part of the punishment. Conveniently, I might also add that the opposition never took time to mention the offenses of the men locked up when pleading their case. Anyhow, despite the backlash, Tent City officially opened in 1993. The concept was now a reality, but its true nature would only be revealed once the first inmates arrived. Tent City was built in Maricopa County, Arizona, one of the state's largest and most populous jurisdictions. It shared its location with other correctional facilities, such as Durango Jail and the Maricopa County Jail Tower, which housed inmates in traditional facilities. The tents used in Tent City were surplus military gear from the Korean War, donated by the U.S. Department of Defense, meaning that the initial cost was approximately $80,000, just a fraction of the $80 to $90 million it would have otherwise cost to build a conventional facility. Since it didn't require permanent structures, the jail was set up rapidly
in '93. The installation of the tents and perimeter fencing only took a few months.
And what about the location? Well, that location was no coincidence.
Joe Arpaio wanted Tent City to be close to other jails to make inmate transfers and supervision easier. Additionally, the facility was just a 15-minute drive from downtown Phoenix, allowing for convenient access to courts and government offices. Because it was within an area already designated for inmates, the jail could operate without the need for significant additional infrastructure.
However, life in Tent City was an experience that, for many, bordered on inhumane. This open-air facility exposed inmates to extreme temperatures with little to no protection.
During the summer, temperatures inside the tents could soar past 145 degrees Fahrenheit, making the air almost unbreathable and causing inmates to suffer from heat stroke, burns, and severe dehydration. In the winter, temperatures dropped below freezing and lived in structures unsuitable to protect them from the cold. The furnishings inside the tents were minimal. Inmates slept on cots without mattresses, making the extreme temperatures even more unbearable. Additionally, the uniforms issued consisted of black and white striped clothing and pink underwear, an initiative said to be introduced by the sheriff himself, allegedly to humiliate prisoners and prevent them from stealing undergarments from each other. As for food, inmates received low-budget meals with tightly controlled portions and poor quality. One of the most infamous staples was soy-based soup, served regularly and widely considered inedible. Leftover food from other institutions was also repurposed and served here. A former inmate who spent 4 months in Tent City in 2012 described the experience as degrading. According to his account, guards often ignored or mocked those who didn't speak English. During the winter, inmates had to improvise ways to stay warm, using things like garbage bags and makeshift ropes to reinforce the tents against the wind and rain.
And with that, what started as a cost-saving strategy ended up, ironically, costing the county millions, PR damage, and lawsuits.
Tent City wasn't just notorious for its brutal conditions, it was also infamous for a disciplinary regime that combined physical punishment with public humiliation, and this was by design. The sheriff wanted his facility to serve as a prime example of what it meant to, quote, do time, enforcing strict rules designed to break inmates down while reinforcing his image as a tough, no-nonsense sheriff. One of the most dreaded forms of punishment was the use of chain gangs. Arpaio reinstated this old-school practice, forcing groups of inmates to be shackled together performing manual labor, such as cleaning roads and picking up trash under Arizona's blistering sun. It didn't matter whether an inmate was serving time for a minor offense or more serious crimes. Everyone was subject to the same treatment.
But the punishments didn't stop at forced labor. Inside Tent City, inmates were subject to blaring patriotic music and motivational speeches at all hours.
Songs like My Way by Frank Sinatra and God Bless America were played on repeat. Arpaio claimed that this was meant to instill patriotism, but many saw it as psychological torture and a constant reminder that they had no control over their environment. Food restrictions were also used as punishment. The meals were already low quality, but inmates who disobeyed the rules could be given even smaller portions, leaving them hungry as an additional form of discipline. Beyond that, in Tent City, inmates weren't just required to follow guards' rules, but they also had to abide by the unwritten laws enforced by fellow prisoners. Like many US prisons, inmates organized themselves into racial groups, with new arrivals being greeted by someone of their own race who would explain these unofficial rules of the jail. These groups had leaders known as shot callers and enforcers who ensured compliance through their own brand of justice. For the guards, these internal power structures posed an ongoing challenge, as they dictated much of the daily life inside the facility.
Another surprising fact was that even though Tent City was surrounded by barbed wire and under constant surveillance, a black market was thriving from within.
Contraband. Everything from tobacco to drugs was thrown over the fences by people on the outside, so that on the inside, inmates could organize illicit networks to distribute the goods. Cigarettes were the most sought-after commodity, often selling for outrageous prices. This underground trade led to frequent clashes between inmates and directly challenged the authority of the guards, who conducted surprise raids in an effort to crack down on this illegal activity. To maintain order in such a volatile environment, the county authorities created a Special Response Team, also known as SRT, a specialized squad trained to conduct sudden raids inside Tent City. Armed with riot shotguns, pepper gas grenades, and non-lethal weapons, the SRT would storm the tents without warning, subduing inmates and searching every inch of the prison for weapons, drugs, and other prohibited items. These operations were brutal, instilling fear among the prisoners, but despite SRT's aggressive tactics, the illicit trade inside Tent City never completely stopped. In an effort to ensure that everyone knew just how tough the jail was, the sheriff also installed security cameras and even allowed media access. Reporters were permitted to tour the facility and interview inmates, all as a part of the sheriff's attempt to showcase his system as both effective and a strong deterrent. However, these media spectacles only fueled more criticism and increased allegations about inhumane conditions inside the prison.
And you have to wonder, were these tactics to have a more effective prison, or was it all just a media spectacle? One thing's for sure, the coverage contributed to the downfall of Tent City.
From the moment it opened in 1993, Tent City was impossible to ignore. What started as a local solution to overcrowding quickly became a national and even international controversy. Media outlets across the US and around the world reported on the prison's brutal conditions and the sheriff's inflammatory statements. Over the years, tensions inside Tent City kept escalating, and by May of 1996, the prison experienced one of its most chaotic movements. A group of inmates rioted after an officer allegedly sprayed them with pepper spray directly in the face. This situation quickly spiraled out of control when 8 guards were taken hostage and 2 tents were burnt to the ground. For 3 hours, Tent City was in complete disarray until law enforcement managed to regain control. The riot alarmed the local community and reignited the debate. Was Tent City truly an effective disciplinary model, or was it simply a ticking time bomb waiting to explode? Human rights organizations like Amnesty International and the United Nations continued to publicly condemn the prison, labeling it as a facility that subjected inmates to inhumane and degrading treatment. In 1997, Amnesty International conducted an on-site inspection and concluded that Tent City failed to meet even the most basic human rights standards, particularly for exposing inmates to extreme temperatures without adequate protection. The UN also included Tent City on its report of human rights violations in the United States, arguing that the conditions inmates face were comparable to those in a prisoner of war camp.
Despite these criticisms, Tent City still had its supporters, especially among the tough-on-crime crowd.
To them, the prison was an effective and cost-efficient deterrent. Some conservative politicians and commentators praised it as a model for how criminals should be treated, with no luxuries, no comforts, and no excuses. However, political opposition to Tent City was equally fierce. Human rights groups held numerous protests outside the facility, demanding its closure, and held the sheriff personally responsible for the inhumane conditions. At various points, thousands of demonstrators, including activists, religious leaders, and progressive politicians, gathered to call for the prison's shutdown. Meanwhile, Arpaio faced numerous lawsuits over civil rights violations, racial profiling allegations, and abuse of power claims, legal battles that would eventually land him in court.
This was a classic American story of extreme political perspectives, with no one willing to consider the other side of the coin or even talk about a middle ground. So perhaps only one fact can be agreed upon. Tent City had an ability to spark controversy.
Over the years, Tent City lost its status as a symbol of authority and discipline. As national debates over inmate treatment and prisoner conditions intensified, the outdoor prison began losing support. Human rights reports, lawsuits against the sheriff, and investigations exposing the actual cost of maintaining the facility weakened its image as an effective model. Yet the key factors in this facility's decline was the decreasing inmate population. You see, over time, fewer prisoners were sent to Tent City, and many cells in the county's conventional jails remained empty, raising questions about the necessity of keeping a facility with such extreme conditions running when there was available space elsewhere. But the final blow came in 2016 when the sheriff lost his re-election bid to Paul Penzon, who campaigned on reforming the county's prison system. One of his first actions as sheriff was ordering an audit of Tent City, which revealed that instead of saving money, the jail actually cost around $8.7 million annually, without showing any proven benefits in crime reduction. On April the 4th, 2017, Penzone publicly announced the permanent closure of Tent City, stating that the facility was not an effective form of punishment and only served to fuel a, quote, political circus. According to the new sheriff, keeping it open was costing taxpayers more than it was contributing to public safety and crime prevention. In his view, the concept was more of a relic from an era of extreme policies than a real solution to the problems within the penal system. After nearly 24 years of operation, Tent City was dismantled. Its last tents were removed in October of 2017, marking the end of one of the most controversial prison experiments in US history. And indeed, while Tent City may be gone, its legacy and the debates it sparked continue on to this very day.
So let's end this episode with two questions. For the law-abiding citizens, what's your take on this story? And for those who maybe broke the law and ended up in Tent City, what was it like to do time there? Share your stories and opinions in the comments section below. Hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Otherwise, as always, I'm Ryan Socash, signing off.